Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. It's just gone 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to give everyone a chance to join. Do feel free to drop into the Q&A box and say hi. We've disabled the chat feature as we've discovered it can cause problems for some people using screen readers. So I can see the numbers going up. I'm glad you could make it today. Just let a few more of you join. So I can see most of you have joined now, so we're going to make a start. So hi everyone and welcome to the 7th session now in our Accessibility Insights series, where AbilityNet's Head of Digital Inclusion, Christopherson, hosts a monthly online chat with individuals who are each working to improve digital accessibility and digital inclusion. This month, he's chatting to Alejandro Moledo, who is Policy Coordinator at the European Disability Forum, also known as EDF. I'm Annie Mannion, and I'm Digital Communications Manager at AbilityNet, and I'll be running you through today's session. So just to go through a few bits of housekeeping, we have live captions provided today by MyClearText, and you can turn on the captions using the CC option on the control panel. We do have additional captions available via streamtext.net, and slides are available at slideshare.net/AbilityNet, and also on our website at /insights-edf. And if you have any technical issues and you need to leave early, don't worry, you'll receive an email in a couple of days' time with the recording, the transcript and the slides. And depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find a Q&A window. So if you'd like to ask Alejandro or Robin any questions, please do drop those in the Q&A area for them to address. And they will do that after today's session on our website, again at /insights-edf. Then we also have a feedback page you'll be directed to at the end, which invites you to tell us about any future topics you'd like us to cover. So please do let us know. So now over to Robin and Alejandro.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Annie. And thank you, Alejandro, for joining us this month. Brilliant to have you.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here.
So we always kick off with the same question. What drink have you got to help you get through the ordeal? I've got a nice cup of tea.
I got a nice cup of coffee.
Fantastic. Got that out of the way. So similarly, a lot of the questions that we ask colleagues that come on are very similar as well. And that's because everybody has brilliant observations, and it's really good to get people's different takes on, you know, where we are and where we're going. That's basically what the questions are about in these insight seminars. So what do you think have been the biggest changes in the last 10 years in the landscape of accessibility and digital inclusion?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, if we look at technology and how it has evolved for the past 10 years, we see that more and more, increasingly, we see tech convergence. So before, technologies were developing in kind of an isolation, so the web, the media, the telecommunications, but now we see, and we are used to it, having all services in our smartphone, for example. We see this tech convergence is actually helping accessibility as well. And also the fact that now accessibility is considered as a core aspect of ICT development, that makes it even more convenient for persons with disabilities. Now we don't see that distinction anymore for some of the previous or legacy assistive technologies in the past. We've seen that now accessibility features are built in the devices, and that doesn't mean that we will persons with disabilities, we will stop using assistive technologies, but it means that we have greater opportunities to take advantage of technologies and all the opportunities that this will bring us.
Absolutely. So, and do you see assistive technology being?
Tell me.
Sorry. Oh, no, you finish off what you were going to say first.
No, I was going to say, but I guess we will discuss more in later about the developments on legislation. I think they also made a big difference.
Absolutely, and I do want to talk about that. It's one of my favorite areas. But yeah, so do you think that there'll always be a need for specialist technology? We're obviously seeing huge strides in what's built in, as you were saying, into iOS, into mainstream hardware, the different sensors that are, increasingly being incorporated into smartphones, say, that can then be leveraged by either the built-in accessibility features or by, third-party or even first-party apps. But do you see the AT market being flourishing in 10 years' time, say?
I'll see the AT market changing and taking advantage also of new possibilities with emerging technologies or already emerged technologies such as artificial intelligence, for example. I mean, there is a huge potential there for the AT market as well. So what I know is that we will keep using assistive technologies, even though this distinction that I mentioned before now is less and less clear. But there will be cases and people that will still need technologies which are specifically designed for them. So I think what we need to stress is that these technologies, so assistive technologies and what we call mainstream technologies, they need to work hand in hand. So we should ensure in those legislation that we will talk about, we need to ensure interoperability as well as a great aspect to bear in mind.
Absolutely. And the legislation, I think, is key. So next month, we're going to be talking to Apple, and I really do see them as a good example of where they have gone above and beyond. They really haven't done a half-hearted attempt at accessibility. They've really kind of pushed the inclusion envelope on an off-the-shelf product, really made it very flexible. And many would say that's because of, Section 508 in the States. They had very large volume budgets available for, under the federal government, particularly in education, for bulk purchases of, devices, but they had to be accessible, had to be inclusive because of the legislation. And maybe that's why Apple really kind of prioritized accessibility, or maybe it's just because they always knew it was the right thing to do. But I'm sure legislation helped. And you've been very active in this space in the EU. So you can tell us what your take on, how important having legislation in the mix is too.
Yeah, definitely. I think legislation obviously is not the solution for absolutely everything, but I believe that is key. And if you allow me to just take a step back, or maybe a couple of steps back, I would also stress the importance, which sometimes in these conversations about accessibility, we don't realize of the crucial role that the disability movement played, in calling for the rights to make sure that this paradigm shift towards a human rights-based approach towards disability was actually realized in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And this convention is actually the first international human rights treaty that recognizes access, explicitly access to information and communication technology as one of the rights that should be protected and ensured for persons with disabilities, because we realized as a movement that with technology can open up a wide range of opportunities for us in our increasingly digitalized society. So with the UNCRPD, for many countries, and particularly in the EU, I'm saying particularly in the EU because the US has not yet ratified the UNCRPD, but in Europe, that may change, who knows? But in Europe now, it's actually ratified by the European Union as a whole, and then by all member states. So we have universal ratification of this important human rights treaty, which in the end, okay, is is just a tool, is a driver for innovation in how the legislation treats persons with disabilities. And thanks to the convention, we've seen a great progress, particularly in the area of accessibility in the EU. We have the Web Accessibility Directive, making public sector websites and mobile apps application. We have the flagship initiative of the European Accessibility Act, which is a directive as well, a European directive that has a very strong ICT component, and is kind of very much aligned with what you mentioned with the Section 508. We have, for the first time, a European standard on accessibility requirements for ICT products and services, which is even, I dare to say, even more comprehensive and more ambitious than the current Section 508. The thing is that in the US, they've been legislating accessibility longer than us, and that's why the US has been always leading on accessibility policies. But I believe that with the Accessibility Act, if you want, we can talk a little bit more about it. But with the Accessibility Act, the EU and Europe as such, because no matter Brexit, no matter countries associated with the EU, I think Europe as a continent has finally made this turning point towards having accessibility as a core aspect of technologies, current
Absolutely.
and future.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to see the kind of impact that it's going to have. So I was going to ask you what you think, over the last 10 years has brought about this massive change. And it sounds like, if you wind the cause, the links in the chain back to the root cause, it's disabled people.
Yeah.
And them, getting their voices heard, getting the right legislation, having their rights realized and recognized, or at least recognized. And you wind that forward and you've got something like the European Accessibility Act, which has got so much potential. Tell us a bit more about it.
Well, the act is actually has a very the European Commission was very smart in the approach they took for this legislation, because instead of proposing legislation based on anti-discrimination, which would require unanimity by member states. And on a side note, I can say that since 2008, we are waiting for an anti-discrimination legislation in the EU, which we don't have because it's been blocked by member states. But the Commission instead, they said, okay, we are going to propose a market access legislation, meaning that only those products and services respecting the accessibility requirements that they lay down in the legislation will be able to be sold and move freely in the EU, imported, distributed, and so forth. So they actually took this market approach, and which I believe is the key aspect of the Accessibility Act, they detailed down the specific accessibility requirements, well, functional accessibility requirements. So they don't tell you exactly, for example, what format you need to use in your service, but they tell you that whatever format it is, if it is digital information, it should comply with the usual accessibility guidelines that we all know, no? But the scope is as I said before, is very, very strong on new technologies. It covers computers, smartphone and tablets. It covers telephony services. It covers emergency services. I mean, for the first time, finally, we are going to have the possibility, and I mean persons with disabilities, to call the emergency numbers in an accessible manner. I mean, there are still countries in Europe that consider fax as an accessible way to contact an emergency number. That is not acceptable. There is also ebooks, which will be very, very important for inclusive education as well. So all ebooks being sold in the EU will need to be accessible, no doubt about it. E-readers as well, e-commerce. We always talk a lot about the Web Accessibility Directive because it affects the public sector, and obviously the public sector's website and mobile apps must be accessible, but the Accessibility Act covers e-commerce. And basically all the websites and mobile apps that we use in our everyday life, they try to sell you something, so they will be included. They are included in the Accessibility Act. ATMs, banking machines, payment terminals. The payment terminals that we used next corner shop to pay with our credit card will finally be accessible, which is always an issue for partially sighted and blind people like myself, like us. And I
The
mean,
number of times I've given somebody in the, the next person in the queue, here's my card, here's my PIN, can I have 60 pounds, please? Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but
no, but that happened to me as well.
Yeah, enforcement, how important is that for government or local authorities or whoever the relevant bodies should be to proactively enforce this legislation? Because to me, that's the missing link, certainly here in the UK.
Yeah, no, I think enforcement is crucial, and unfortunately, when it comes to enforcement, I think that the EU still a bit lagging behind compared to the US. But I also think that the Accessibility Act will strengthen that, because as I explained, this legislation, the Accessibility Act, is a market access legislation. Therefore, it will be the market surveillance authorities and in each country, the ones that will verify that the products will be in compliant with the legislation. And if they are not, they have the possibility even to withdraw the product from the internal market. So they can force a company to stop selling their product. Imagine TVs are included. Nowadays, the most accessible TVs are always the most expensive. So in 5 years' time, when the act is finally implemented, if we see that there is a company that is trying to sell a TV set which is not accessible, then the market surveillance authority can say, hey, either you include the accessibility requirements or you cannot sell this product anymore. And they have also the possibility to impose penalties. Users organizations can also take economic operators to court in case they don't comply with the legislation. There are some possibilities that we will need to explore in the future, but the most important and the most urgent issue at the moment is how countries will transpose, meaning how they take this European legislation and translate it into national legislation. This is now the moment that we are, and it's important that countries do this right. Otherwise, we may lose some of the potential of this directive.
Yeah, exciting times. And this,
Yeah,
to be clear,
indeed.
is very different legislation than what, we've had in the past. It's much clearer. The lines of kind of responsibility and the way it's defined, as you've said, being on the product or the service is key. I think it's going to be as core to the product as health and safety. Is this
exactly.
Smartphone going to catch fire? Is this chicken that I've bought from the supermarket safe to eat? That kind of thing. So,
and you mentioned something very important, which is, for instance, for those other aspects like safety, health issues, environmental aspects, and so forth. We do have European harmonized legislation, but we also have standards. And I believe this is one of the great added values of the Accessibility Act. It provides at least of accessibility requirements, because the problem that we always face, people with disabilities, like accessible, yeah, but in practice, what does it mean? What does it mean accessible? Of course, accessibility is not a black-white issue. It's a huge range of grays in between. So the legislation helps to put the line, to draw the line, and with clear accessibility requirements that then will be supported, as in the health or in the safety or in the environmental sectors, with standards, then industry will also have a clear view on what they need to do to make sure that at least an adequate level of accessibility is ensured. That is very important.
Yep. I wish we were still part of Europe. Anyway, so my next question then, to change gears or topic maybe a little bit, is about COVID. It's still with us. Who'd have thought it when we started back in the summer? And it's looking like it's going to be here for a while, but it has really brought a lot of positives, I think, as well as huge negatives. Either you personally or the organizations that you work for or with, what would you say, have been the biggest takeaways, the biggest learning points from either COVID or home working that you think, has made a significant change for, people with disabilities across Europe?
Well, I think we've learned. I mean, in the past, pre-COVID reality, we also We also worked with all our members across Europe, and we developed webinars to kind of raise awareness of legislation. We have webinars explaining different legislation or initiatives and so forth. So we kind of did it before the COVID outbreak, but it is true that now with all the meetings turning into webinars and video conference calls, and we learned that we learned how to system structure the organization of this. Before we were more organizing in a more chaotic way, but now we really got used to checking with your audience. I think that's one of the main learnings, like in the registration for making sure that all possible accessibility services such as live subtitling, sign language interpretation, presentations sent in advance, or are available there, and then of course allowing the audience to request any other reasonable accommodation that they may need. And we are
Absolutely.
teaching this to other organizations, and that I think that's very, very, very important. When other organizations ask for our advice on which platform to use, and obviously not there is no a single a really easy answer, and there is not a perfect platform, but we have our tricks, and we kind of try to build the capacity of other organizations as well.
Have you found it fine? I mean, I'm loving it. I'm loving this whole not having to travel half a day for an hour's meeting and back at home again. I can fit 6 meetings in a day, although that's got its downside as well. But are you
Well,
managing?
I think I miss it. I miss the face-to-face meetings. I mean, it's not the same, but obviously it allows for more productivity. There is no way, but it also implies that what we know as the webinar fatigue or Zoom fatigue and so forth. So maybe sometimes we overdid it. So we overdid, arranging video calls and webinars and stuff. But I think we need to find this balance, and we are finding it step by step, because it's true that this situation will continue in the near future. So we are trying to get the best out of it, but also, bearing in mind that people also need to rest from connecting and being with the camera on and so forth. So we are very flexible with that and trying to find this balance.
I mean, I've come to some fantastic EDF meetings and other European, fantastic events. So I'm really pleased about that. But at the same time, with Zoom and Teams, etc., Europe is a very small place. The world is a, just a very small place when you can really harness that power to get people's voices heard and, coordinated and that sort of thing. So
yeah. I mean, it's great to reach out to more people, because before you used to organize an event in Brussels and only the usual suspects could attend. But now, I remember when the COVID-19 outbreak, we organized a meeting with the Commissioner for Equality, Elena Dali, and the members of the European Parliament that follow disability issues. And we didn't expect, but suddenly it was one of the first open webinars we organized, and suddenly we got over 500 people registered for that discussion, because it was the first high-level discussion about, what's the role of the EU in responding to the pandemic, as for persons with disabilities are concerned. So that was really impressive. So it's true that you can reach out to more people, and that's something that we need to keep on doing.
And we certainly have been able to reach out and get many, more numbers of people attending our webinars over the last year or so. So absolutely. So let's look ahead then over the coming months and years. What's going to change, or what needs to change going forward?
Yeah, exactly.
So that was a question.
Okay. I thought.
Sorry.
I wasn't sure, so I just agree with you.
Yeah, lots.
So what is going to change, or what can we expect from
what would you like to change, or what needs
come?
to change, or what do you think the future will hold with regards either inclusion, legislation, or tech?
The future is uncertain, right? If 2020 has showed us something, is that future is always uncertain. But I would definitely would like or wish to see a more, inclusive and approach to, on the one hand, the designing of products and services, because it's true that we see that technologies are really on a good track in improving accessibility, but there is way more work to do when it comes to the built environment, to transport services, to everyday products that we use, and then going more particularly on accessibility and the political, let's say, future. We are expecting the Commission to present the next disability strategy, which will be hopefully released very soon. And one demand that we had when it comes to accessibility has been the creation of a new agency, a European agency, similar to what they have in the US. We've talked about the progress in the US, and I think that's being also because of the great agency they have, the US Access Board. So we think that Europe could also set up a new agency for accessibility, the EU Access Board, that could support member states, industry, disability organization in coming together, defining the accessibility policies and the standards, and monitoring whether they are used, and to support harmonized, as they call it, a harmonized implementation of accessibility. So because it's very sometimes very frustrating to see that countries suddenly, or companies suddenly, they try to reinvent the wheel again and come up with solutions, different solutions to make your website accessible. Just add this plugin to your website and click here and it will be magically made accessible. Well, that's not true. So yeah, I would like a focal point center for accessibility with really high trained professionals and the expertise to implement accessibility policies. That would be my wish for the accessibility, and of course all related to the discussions, the policy discussions around artificial intelligence or digital services, digital platforms. I also think that we need to be there to ensure that persons with disabilities, on the one hand, are not discriminated against, and then accessibility is considered, as in other areas, a fundamental part of the technology.
Fantastic. And rather spookily, you have answered the question that Malin put to you. I know you know Malin from the Norwegian Digitalization Agency.
Indeed.
And yeah, she said that. What would you see as being the kind of next step in EU legislation? Now we've got the directive in place and the Accessibility Act on the way. So
exactly.
Yeah, thanks for that.
No worries.
So we've got a minute left, perhaps. Is there anything else you wanted to? Well, actually, let's ask your question for the next guest then.
Yeah.
So Sarah Herlinger of Apple, main accessibility lady there, is, we're very happy to have her on next month. So have you got a question that we can put to Sarah?
I do. So my question would be, what is the most positive aspect that accessibility legislation has brought to Apple's work? We discussed this before, so I think it's a good follow-up question. So we hear from them on what they need to say.
Brilliant. It's all very joined up today, because we touched upon that earlier, whether we thought that was their main driver or what, or whether they're just good guys. So we will put that to Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
No. I just wanted to say, as you mentioned, the UK not being part of the EU anymore, I think is really a pity to lose UK, because UK has been also leading when it comes to accessibility. For example, it's been also our role model when it comes to media accessibility, for example, and it's truly a pity to miss such a great member state in this sense, in this domain. And in any case, I do believe that even though we talked about European legislation today, I think this legislation will still have in any case have an impact in UK's legislation and accessibility legislation. So I'm grateful to see AbilityNet and other organizations in the UK being so active and vocal on accessibility. And I believe what we need to make sure is to keep the communication flowing and make sure that the UK is aligned with the EU when it comes to having an ambitious legal framework for accessibility. So in that case, you can count on us to keep on this communication and this exchange of best practices.
Fantastic. Really appreciate you coming on. Brilliant discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. In the last few seconds then, I'll pass back to Annie to gallop through a bit of housekeeping to finish off. But Alejandro, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks so much, Alejandro and Robin. Just wanted to share some more information about AbilityNet. We also run fantastic online training courses on digital accessibility. You can find out more about that at abilitynet.org.uk/training. And you can use this 10% discount code available to registrants of our webinars at AbilityNet webinar 1010. We have training courses coming up this quarter for roles including content creators and editors, designers, developers, testers, project managers, leadership, and we also have some new courses focused specifically on higher and further education professionals. And then you can also sign up to our newsletter for the latest announcements about digital accessibility, visit our YouTube channel and download our podcast. And we also have a suite of accessibility services that you might be interested in too. And then finally, don't forget about our next webinars at /webinars. Coming soon, we have Accessibility Insights with Apple, and that's on the 16th of February. And before that, Tablets for Seniors, Keeping in Touch with Loved Ones, and that's on the 26th of January. So once again, thank you, Alejandro, Robin, and everyone that's joined us today, and we'll be in touch with you soon. Bye, everyone.